When I started as a videographer, my dream was to shoot for big brands such as Adidas and Nike. Although these were big aspirations, I built my portfolio with work that I wanted to create, as well as paying the bills with recaps and corporate-style videography work. Fast forward to today, and that dream of shooting for Nike has been fulfilled. In this video, I'm going to share exactly how you can work with brands like this and go over a full breakdown on terms of how we executed this project.
Never done.
Never done.
Never done.
Never done dreaming.
Never done dreaming.
Never done dreaming.
Never done waking up early.
Never done waking up early.
Never done putting in the
Never
work.
done putting in the work.
Never done failing.
Never done extra reps.
Never done.
Never done.
Never done fighting.
Never done proving them wrong.
Never done putting on the crew.
Never done shit. Never done.
Never done dropping dimes. Never done making stops.
Never done cheating.
Hoops is never done.
When it comes to getting work, especially in the commercial campaign field, the two most important things are the connections you have made in addition to your portfolio. There are so many jobs that we have received as a production company, and me individually as a director of photography, due to the connections that we have made and the portfolio that we have built for ourselves. Creating work for yourself that you want to be hired for is one of the most valuable things that you can do for yourself as a videographer and especially as a cinematographer. This tells the world what your style and voice is. And if you create work for the field you want to be hired in, the work will eventually come to you if you take the right steps, of course. The backbone of what we do here at Tenfold is spec work. Like I said before, there are so many times that we have received jobs just due to our diverse portfolio that we have created for ourselves. But as we backtrack, the many spec projects that we have done, the more important thing is the relationships that we have created from those projects. And this is where the story of landing a job for Nike starts. If we start from the top, where the director reached out to me personally in terms of working on an upcoming Nike campaign for the all-Canadian basketball games that Nike was going to be the sponsor for. Now, the director found me through one of our score and audio mixers, Adrian Belair. 90% of the work that you have seen on Tenfold was scored and mixed by Adrian, and he's been an amazing collaborator as well as creative to work with. Through Adrian posting our work, as well as developing a strong creative relationship, others in his circle noticed as well. In addition to our work, Adrian does a lot of score and mixing for Nike, Adidas, and other fashion brand campaigns. I received a cold call from the director of the project, and he said that Adrian connected him with me, in addition to saying a lot of good things in terms of our work together, as well as how we work creatively. Now, if we look at a timeline, Adrian was introduced to us by Jason, a member of Tenfold, by just reaching out to him, seeing if we could work together in future projects. And this was over a year ago before we even shot this Nike campaign. This just goes to show that you never know who is watching. In addition, if you're just a nice person to work with, this will leave a lasting impression. And this impression will get you more work than you can ever imagine. Now, if we talk about this project specifically, this was one that I was very intimidated by, as well as unsure if I could pull it off. The main thing that we wanted to get across was that athletes put in work even when no one was watching, by showcasing the space that they train in. Now, the reason why I was so intimidated was how was I supposed to shoot a commercial without any people in it? I was just going to be shooting a location and show it off how it's intended to be in the piece. We are now going to look how exactly we executed this by going over the project from start to finish. Like I said before, this project is to showcase the work that is put in when nobody is watching, and more specifically in like an early morning training session right before like a school starts or something like that. This was targeted at high school students, so we shot this in a school, and this was shot in Hamilton. So this was a one-day shoot, and we shot this on the Arri Alexa 35 paired with the Zeiss Super Speeds, a probe lens, as well as a zoom lens with one zoom shot there. So we had to showcase basically the space, the jerseys, the shoes, everything that was going to be used in this game, as well as this early morning dark moody vibe. As you can see, we go from dark, then we start to light paint, and then we go into this whole thing where the voices start coming in and the lights start turning on in terms of like, no, it's game time, get hyped and everything like that. So this was supposed to be like a hype up trailer to the actual game to get people excited in terms of what they're doing. In terms of looking at where Tenfold sits in this, we were just brought on for production, myself as a director of photography, and then Tenfold hired out with the rest of the crew, which is with the rest of the guys. And then this was brought into post-production by the director's editor, and then everybody they wanted to use. Which I love working on projects like this because I like to see others' point of view in terms of how it's supposed to be cut, as well as working with other directors in terms of what their intent of the project is and not necessarily the style that Tenfold has created. So this is definitely a little different from our regular work, but still a good piece that we're all proud of. If you want to get more in depth with us and learn to become a cinematographer, check out our education link in the description below. Anyways, back to the breakdown. So as I said, going into this project, I was super nervous because I was shooting a space and not necessarily people. I'm very used to shooting people, brands, fashion, stuff like that, and a lot of products, but not necessarily just executing on a bunch of spaces. So if we go into this first shot that we're looking here, we're mainly looking at composition and then me developing this moody vibe, being the director of photography in terms of what they want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the available lights in the space to create that mood and that depth. So right here, I am shooting through a frame within a frame, and this just tells the audience that we're going to be entering this court, that we're going to be doing all this work in. And to accent this and to add some mood back into the actual scene, I have these lights turned in here. So we had access to the individual breakers in each room of the scenes that we're shooting in, so we can turn on and off the specific strip lights that we're looking for. As you can see later on the edit, some of the lights didn't necessarily work, which added to the whole grit of the whole piece as well. So I turn on these lights here, and this is me backlighting the whole court, which develops this mood and interest in terms of light and dark parts of the image. So this light is painting down here, and it paints the court and puts these nice streaks of light that just draw our attention to. But if I didn't have any other additional lights in this would be a little too dark. So what I had my gaffer do is just shoot a light, which was like an f22. This was like probably 0.5%. And this was set at 5600 Kelvin to match the sources that were on the inside. As you can see, it's like a more daylight source. So this is just bounced up into the ceiling, and this just gives me a little bit of fill and a little bit more detail on this side of the image so that we're not completely crushing these doors so it doesn't look unusable in post. So a lot of what happens when shooting spaces like this is you're heavily relying on composition as well as using the available lights to shoot into. So this is already me developing a shadow side, which I love to talk about, and this is already me developing that shadow side and me talking about these light and dark parts of the image. We have this dark frame and these nice pools of light, and this just creates that natural checkerboard going across the whole piece. As we look at the edit, this is me just walking in handheld to give you that effect that, you know, we're observing this space and what is happening, or as well being a player who is going in to be training this early in the morning. And then this is just a wide shot of that same space to jump into. And again, I don't have any of these top lights on at all. I just have these accent lights in the back just to give you that mood, as well as paint the floor to give me some streaks of light to really give in that effect that we're in early morning. In addition to that, I wanted to turn on the lights that were in these other rooms here. There's 3 of them, just to showcase that there's more dimensionality and bigger space, as well as develop some light and dark parts of the image. And then this is where it gets a little interesting in terms of showcasing other parts of the space. So these initial shots were shot like on an 18 mil. And then as we go into, I wanted to showcase some of the details of the space. So we shot this on a 50, and some of these shots were on an 85 as well. So this is just a rack focus across. And then to add some accent in terms of what we're looking at and keeping it consistent between here and backlighting everything, I had my gaffer point a Forza 500 up into the ceiling and bounce it off and give me some fill and backlighting this to showcase it in its most natural light. This is a gym, it's supposed to be dark and moody. So how do we keep that naturally? And this is something I naturally struggle with in terms of keeping things natural, because I'm very well versed at creating an unrealistic world in terms of commercials and things like that. My usually umbrella of work is very commercial and unworld-like. And when it comes to shooting something natural, this is something that I'm improving on, but it is definitely a weakness of mine. So this is why I'm so intimidated when it comes to shooting projects like this, that making it shoot natural, because natural things are intentionally moody and using lights to play up on that mood to add to it as well. And we just use a rack focus there to help the movement. This was just an in-edit zoom. And this zoom was done in post. And then to add to that, there's a little rack there to showcase some of these banners. And then next is we use some light painting here. So let me erase this. And here you can see that there's a little light play right here. And again, that is that Forza 500. And what I had my gaffer do is we had the Forza aimed at the wall, and then I had him rotate it from the left side of the wall to the right side of the wall. So it wasn't as direct in casting a lot of shadows. As you can see, this light is very soft, and because that is soft because it's bouncing up and bouncing back and then creating that little pocket of light. And it was just to add a little more interest and a little bit more movement, because we thought these tripod shots were a little stale. And then to accent this even more, we had these lights on, as well as these lights on, and the lights on in the back there. But none of the lights were on in the court. In addition to that, there was a little chance of that we could play up on some daylight here. So I had my gaffer rig up that F22 that we used in the beginning shot up into the ceiling to create some atmosphere and mood back there. Right? So when it comes to positioning yourself in these situations and shooting on these bleachers and stuff like that, I'm positioning myself where I'm shooting up into lights so I can create some natural shadow. The light is spilling back into this way, which is into the camera, which is developing all these shadows that you see here. And this is something that we always preach in terms of shooting on the shadow side and shooting up into your sources so you can create that natural depth in your image. And if we even talk about depth and composition here, we have a bunch of leading lines that are leading into this frame that we're looking at right here. Automatically, when this plays, I'm really drawn to that frame over there due to the amount of interest we have. We have a moving light, we have leading lines of the bleachers, as well as this frame within a frame. So multiple composing techniques here, as well as getting interest to what you want your viewer to look at. Going into the next shot, you can see that we're just highlighting this court. So this is the same lighting setup as we had in the first shot here with the bunch of lights on. But if you can imagine that the lights are right here, these lights would be spilling a bunch of light onto the court and not look very flattering at all. We are on the light side of these lights, so it wouldn't necessarily work. So what I had my gaffer and key grip do is rig up 2 sets of floppies here. And this was blocking all the light that was spilling onto the bleachers, as you can see here. But there is this nice pocket of light right here that's coming from another tube coming down here. So this is now taking your naturally lit room with all these lights and now looking at it and saying, how can I make this more interesting? How can I play up on the basic rule of staying on the shadow side? Because now we technically flip those sides by being on this light side. So this is shaping your light with black material. The use of floppies and these stands here just helps us accent that and bring more interest. If I didn't floppy off those lights, there was going to be a bunch of light here in that front of the image and not give us this dark and light pockets that we're looking for. But as you can see, we have those tube lights up on the top there, and you can see that by the streaks of light that are painted here, and as well as the lights on in these rooms to give us more of that accent as well. So all these shots that you see beginning here were to highlight this big court, this big scene that we're going to be shooting. And then we moved into the inserts of the rest of the school as well. So this was just a simple shot of revealing what, this locker room looks like as well. And then, highlight of these shoes to incorporate the brand. So this is how they naturally want to incorporate it. They didn't want to be too pushy on that. And this, again, is using the natural light in the room. Unfortunately, we had 2 big fluorescent fixtures just shooting light down like this, and I wanted to play up by that, but it felt a little too flat. I wanted to create a gradient that was going across here that was from light to dark. So what I did is have my gaffer and grip rig up an overhead floppy just to flag off this light a little bit more, but not kill it entirely. So they kind of had to feather it and rotate it off, and then this is creating all the shadow on the left side of my image. And then if we just look at the fundamentals, we are doing a reveal here, but we have this dark silhouetted part, and then it goes into the dark part, which is on this left side. So this is playing up on how do we keep that fundamental cinematography rule in play here in terms of keeping interest. And this is looking at my available scene, what the director wants to shoot, and then moving in certain things, and then turning on the lights to see what we can do, and then now modifying those lights with black solids and black material. On any shoot, I always have different types of black material so we can do these things. Then if we go to the next shot here, this is the same thing, but I just had my grip walk in a floppy so I could keep that contrast on this side of the image. And then that fluorescent light fixture is just above there and giving us that natural look that we're looking for and keeping on the shadow side. And then to play up on the edit, this is where it starts changing. So whenever I shoot details like this or in any space, I like to do these camera whips, and generally I like to do it in every direction. So this is just the editor utilizing that whip into this next frame. And then again, we're back into this room that we were talking about before. So this was, I shot so many things, different things here, just to play up on, like, you know, visualizing the space when no one is there. And this was just using the natural lines of the basketball hoop here. And then using the court lines as well. And even these railings here. So everything is telling you to look at the center of what we're supposed to be looking at. And to keep it consistent, we always have that ball in that same position there. And then this is just building so many frames within a frame. And then to get my contrast as well as to get a gradient going across the image, I only have the lights on this side on. But then this is again utilizing those floppies overhead to block out the lights that were coming on here. This was because that the lights on the exterior were all on one switch, so we couldn't option certain ones out. So I had my gaffer and grip rig up those floppies again and shift them over. And then to even add a little bit more light, I have that F22 in the beginning up in this room, and this was just shooting up into the ceiling to add that little light pocket right here. And with that setup, we go into start flicking on these lights, as you can see here. This is where the mood of the edit changes, as well as the lighting that we're looking at. So we're going for something very dark, and then we're going to something lighter and very still moody, but now we have to keep that consistent through all those other shots that we're looking at. So I had my gaffer get on the switch box, and then he had these lights just switch on, as you can see here. And then we tested specific ones, and we ran through all the options to see what would look best. And we found that seeing the lights obviously turn on, there's a big beam here, and there's another set of lights there. This one looked better because you visually see the light sources. And then we go into the next shot. So this is just using composition here. So this is, again, using our leading lines and frames. The focus for me here is the hoop, because we have this frame. And then we have a natural leading line. As the light turns on, we get this natural reflection. And this just draws my eye towards the center frame, which is this hoop. And then we just got a bunch of shots of these lights turning on. When it comes to commercials like this, where this is more montage, we had a certain shot list in terms of what we wanted, but also it was great to get the same style of shots in, as well as coverage in each of the locations. We shot inside the same school, but it was 2 courts, as you can see here, compared to this one. And in this court, this is where we did the main, you know, symmetrical leading lines and everything like that. And then in this other court here, we did the same thing, as you can see here. So in this court, you can see that we played up on a lot of symmetry as well as leading lines. If I look at this, this is just very pleasing to any cinematographer or anybody who's involved in this trade, as we just are looking at these lines, and this gives you that grand feeling of you're in a basketball court and I'm putting in the work, right? And then we're focusing on this hoop here as well as the lights turning on. So like I said before, in these montage commercials, you want to have variety in your edit, but as well as have things that you can cut to that are relatively the same. If I look at this frame here relative to this symmetrical frame, I'm like, this makes sense in terms of how they shot this, because we are shooting it in the same way but different. I'm not going to aim up the ceiling and get the same symmetrical frame here because I can't, because the lights are running in the opposite direction. But in this one, I'm going to play up in symmetry in the room by shooting up into the ceiling. And then in each of the room, we got different sets of coverage. As you can see here, this is shot on a 50, and then this is a shot on a 50 again by shooting just straight up into the scoreboard. And then this is shot on an 18 to give you that wide and grand feeling. And then here we got some tights by shooting on an 85 to get that variety and those lights turning on so that editor would have different shots and variety to cut to. What we like to do in Tenfold is shoot a lot of scenes with a lot of different lens coverage just to get you that variety in the edit. We like quick and fast cuts, and this might not necessarily be for everybody, but this is definitely our style. Like I said, this was the main spine of the piece and kind of the product highlight here that we're slowly moving in towards. And the way we lit this is that we used a lot of Titan tubes. The reason I wanted to use Titan tubes is because we were using a bunch of natural sources in terms of all these fluorescence lighting. So I wanted to match that same feeling as well as that natural-esque to the whole commercial. So we have a Titan tube rigged up here, and then we have another Titan tube just laying up in the corner, and then we have another Titan tube rigged up on the ceiling here, which is shooting light down into here. This light is just shooting down here. And this one is just adding that little light on the wall there from the corner. And then you can see here we have a little bit of orange, and that is a little MC in the corner there just to add some splash. And then our main key light here. And then I had an F22 rigged up here on the side, but I can see from the shots that they used, because we shot this both with this light on and off, that they didn't use it because there's not a lot of light popping this out. When I sparked this on like a very low percentage, the director was like, feels a little too lit, feels a little too commercial. So we strike that, and this was naturally lit. And this was lit with the Titan tubes to make it feel like the fluorescent lighting fixtures that we've seen throughout the piece. So again, this is where my mind goes to in terms of lighting things, in terms of making things feel a little bright and airy like that. But again, I had to, relook at what we shot before and what the intention of this whole piece is. It's supposed to be moody, it's supposed to be dark, it's supposed to be full of contrast and everything like that. And then here you can see that we have the natural shadow playing up, and then our eyes are just drawn to the center part of the image and mainly where the shoes are placed, because this is the highlight as we move in closer here. And this was one of my favorite shots of the piece, these little inserts that we did here with this chalkboard. And this chalkboard was the location right here on this part. So these are the chalkboards that they wrote on, and then we shot all these inserts. So this was with the Laowa probe lens. Now this was a full frame lens at 24 millimeters, but the Lexa 35 is Super 35, so it came out to like a 30-32. So it was a little tighter than we thought that we imagined, but still looked amazing in terms of what we were looking for. So we set this up on a Dana dolly, and we had just the camera whipping by and everything like that. And then what I had my gaffer do is rig up a Titan tube overhead, and this was to emulate that nice natural lighting down here. And then I had an Aperture Nova set up over here, and then this was blasting light through this way. The probe lens is a very light hungry lens, so as you can see here, it's super dark on this side, and then the light we only see is on this. I wanted to make this feel like that there was a light source, like a fluorescent tube right above this, and everything else is dark. So I feel like we hit this pretty well, but it's very dark and moody. And then to get other coverage of this, we just had that same Titan tube light source, and then I shot this handheld, and that is just simply the Titan tube shooting down like this and keeping that same look that we're going for before. So this is just giving us that nice top lit source that we've been using consistently across the piece, and gives us a nice gradient when you look from the top to the bottom. And then here are more inserts, but a little tighter, so we got a bunch of variation of this just to have something that the editor can move into. So this is the same shot from before, and this is us getting a little closer and closer to the edit. And we didn't move any lights here, we simply moved the Dana dolly and got a little lower to showcase that we have this all cam 23 there. And again, we have a Titan tube rigged overhead here and one over here, and the other one isn't really casting light, and it's basically backlighting the shoe and giving us this nice interest and natural feeling product highlight here. And that is us just slowly moving into that. And this is just an insert that we shot naturally. This is me using the sources that were already there. And this is just the light coming from this side. And then I had my gaffer flag off the top to give us this natural gradient that we see here. And it doesn't feel too lit or anything like that. Here we have some random inserts of the hoop. And this is us just shooting it at different angles and everything like that. So this is me up on a ladder and holding some of this stuff. And this is just the camera placed on the floor. And then this one is again on the ladder, getting that variety. So like you can see, this is again in that same room that we saw it before. And we spent about 4 hours in this room getting all these different shots and getting this variety. When it comes to shooting commercials like this, variety is going to be your best friend. So we can move to different shots and we can have constant interest in a commercial that just is surrounded by a location. And this is just shooting in a hallway. This is just a big play up on leading lines and using the space to your advantage. We have a frame that we're constantly looking at and shooting through if we look at a larger frame back here. And then those lights just help us look down this hallway with these lines here from the bottom. And then these lines here from the top. And we like the look of the school because this was in Hamilton and this was a abandoned school that everybody uses for production. And this really helped us play up on in terms of this is like a really, nitty and gritty commercial with a nitty and gritty school. So we really like the moodiness of it and like these little imperfections that really help with the piece, like this light not being available to use. Again, so this is us standing in the hallway and then me seeing the available lights I have. This is just a natural shooting into my lights in a backlight situation and then setting my camera settings to make this feel as natural as possible and not too lit. This goes into another highlight in terms of the shoes and stuff, in terms of showcasing what, the jerseys of the tournament will look like and making them look natural as well as showcasing logos and everything like that. So this was shot in a washroom, and this is pretty funny in terms of where we had to get our camera to shoot this. We are sitting on top of a sink and then shooting into this with the zoom lens. And this is an in-camera zoom, which looks very natural. And then I simply had an f/22 set up on the side here. And this is casting all my light here. And then I had my gaffer rig up Aperture Nova sitting behind this wall here. And that is just adding some interest and contrast back into this background here. And these were set at very low percentages as we want to keep it as natural as possible. And then I have a Titan 2 rigged up here to emulate that fluorescent light and to showcase that we're in a locker room, that this feels natural, not super lit or anything like that. And then we didn't have any lights on in the bathroom necessarily where the camera is, just to have that dark silhouette and that we can really build a frame within a frame. And this is our natural zoom in, and then I just moved in for some handheld movements, and this is the same lighting setup just to give some inserts and some variety. And this next shot is in the same locker room, and then we just kind of had to shift lights and turn the other ones off. And then I just took that f/22, had my gaffer bounce it up into the ceiling, and then this is bouncing that light back into our jersey here to make it feel as natural as possible in terms of having top lit sources. As you can see, that shadow from this locker here is directed down, so you can kind of tell that this is top lit, and then it gives us a natural shadow side that we're shooting into. As again, this is the same setup we had before, but this is just showcasing another jersey. Now this is the tighter shot of moving into the shoe, and we can see that we kind of move some of the lights here. I always like to shoot the wide first and then move in, and then you can adjust lights. I always find the wide shot a lot harder to light because we're dealing with so many things and so many pockets of light that we have to, paint and deal with. But here I'm only dealing with the shoes, and that's about it. So if we just look at the shadows and where they're being casted, you can see that this is top lit. So this is me keeping those Titan tubes at the top, but this is bringing in that f/22, softening it up and shooting it down into this to match that. So I'm matching the sources that have already been set and the consistency of the set as well, and then bringing in that and accenting it because we're highlighting it. We want to see everything here. And then you can see that shadow develop from the shoe here and then even here. So this is just me biasing my lights a little back to the back side of the shoe so I can backlight it and highlight everything that's going on here. And you can see that by it being kicked out on the side here and that nice gradient we have going across from the front to the back of the shoe. And this is us dollying in, and they added a little bit of digital. And this goes into the last shot of the piece, where we did a bunch of these inserts where we had the lights turning on, like I said before. And this is just a great example of why you get coverage in a variety of focal lengths. If we just cut to this shot of the lights turning on, it might feel a little stale, but this is a nice 2-shot that the editor used. And you can showcase the lights turning on here, and then some of the lights are on, and then even more are turning on to extend this length of period of time. Realistically, all the lights are being turned on at the end of the shot here, but we can extend that even more and build this, hype and everything that we're looking for in terms of this edit with this 2-shot sequence here. So it's just something to consider when you are shooting locations or any projects like this, is to apply these things. What we really covered here is to how to showcase a location and its best light by shaping the lights that are already there and with all the black and negative material, as well as the important aspects of where to position your camera into shooting things, making it feel grand, or shooting tight things. If we look at the key takeaways that I personally took away from this project, is to mainly dial in your composition in terms of framing things, having leading lines, and getting the best angle as well as variety when it comes to shooting one location. I played up on composition here, and this was a very composition heavy project in terms of just showcasing things, having my audience and viewer focus on a certain thing. And then from there, how can we accent this with lights that are provided in this space? How can we modify those lights, as well as add our own lights to even bring this to another level? These are things that I just want you to consider in your next project. It doesn't matter what it is, but these are lessons that I learned on this project specifically. And I go into every project with that mindset in hand, that I'm gonna learn something new. This isn't a project for me just to get paid. This is a project for me to develop my skills. And when you have that mindset and you change that mindset of yourself as taking things on a challenge and not necessarily just getting a paycheck, it really puts you in the mind of a cinematographer and really being intentional with your images.